Hey all, back with the wargaming miniatures hobby stuff, right? And this one I've titled Celebrate Your Opponents, and just to give you it's a mindset thing, Imagine this, imagine a circumstance where you celebrate your opponent's successes. Imagine doing that. And you know what would be created? Perhaps you do that already. But what you would create in so doing that is you'd be making your opponent have a better time, making them feel more, they're able to enjoy their successes more. Because the thing about gaming that's really important is that when you deploy your miniatures on the table, or in fact, it could really apply to all gaming, but something so in-depth like miniature wargaming, where you've done so much prep to even bring it to the table and it's such a long game, then you are effectively signing with your opponent a social contract. Now that contract is basically, it's an unspoken, unwritten contract. And it is saying, we're both going to try and have a good time here. We're both going to try and be fair to each other. And to try and gain some sort of fun out of it. If you're at a tournament, that's another matter altogether. Some people have different feelings and behaviours in things like that. But, have you ever been in a game where you've won, right, but due to the other person breaking their social contract in some way, shape or form, it doesn't really mean anything to you having won? Or perhaps you've been that person who for a while were breaking that social contract and you were winning. And you won in such a way that, the other person feels bad. But you made them feel bad perhaps. And then your win doesn't feel so good. Have you experienced it that way around? So the social contract is important from the point of view that it builds up your opponent. Because you need them. Because you can't play on your own. So it's kind of it's a hobby thing. We need other people to play this. I'm antisocial. It's my natural inclination. Except all of my hobbies are socialising hobbies. So I'm always being challenged to pull myself out of this, It's a funny thing. I remember back to a standard bearer article that was in White Dwarf some years ago, where Jervis Johnson was writing about the face. I think I might have mentioned this on the channel before, And what he's talking about with the face is something that you may have noticed your opponents do, or you could maybe feel yourself getting the face. There's this point in the game where you've become drained enough, emotionally invested enough in the outcome, where things are starting to maybe turn against you on the field. Maybe there's been a few unfair, as you would call it, dice rolls, right? And you're starting to feel screwed over, your army on the field there. And you start maybe getting the face. You could feel that sullenness starting to grow. You can almost feel it on your own face. Have you ever... And that's the moment of self-awareness that's really important, where you can give yourself this talk. And at that moment in time, it's so hard, perhaps, to give yourself the talk, This is a social contract. This is fun. This is fun for the both of us. There will be more games. This is just part of a long line of games. This is building my opponent up so we can play more games. This is making it just as fun for them as it is for me. So they will play me more and more and more and more, so we can do lots of stuff together. It's that thing, of trying to just be aware of it. And it's so hard, I know. I know it is. For you and your opponent. It takes a certain degree of self-awareness, a certain degree of maturity. That's not an insult at anyone saying they are immature. It's just like being able to access it at that moment. There's a certain quality required that can be learned, perhaps, as a social contract skill. Something to be aware of there. And maybe the mindset to take into this. And it's always really pleasant when I'm observing a game happening where the other players are doing this, where you're actually celebrating and getting excited for what your opponent is managing to pull off. Whoa, yes. Oh wow, you've just pulled off that a spout, and you've just max leveled it. Wow, are you gonna make my unit break? Are they gonna run? They're running. Look at that. You've just wiped them out straight off the field. Whoa, that was an incredible roll. You know, you can be excited for them. It isn't necessarily doing anything bad to you, is it? Yes, your unit just got beaten. All right, okay, all right. So in the microcosm of the game we're in, that's really, really bad, right, for the game. But then that's this. But what you and your opponent are really doing, you know, you're sitting in a field that's bigger than this fishbowl that this game's happening in. You're in a much wider place with your opponent, you know. This is a hobby. This is a mutual respect thing. And, you know, some people aren't going to have that. They're not going to have the qualities to be able to meet you equally. You can just try your best and play your part in the social contract and do what you can, you know. So my challenge is maybe try this out. Try celebrating your opponent's great rolls and great manoeuvres, and congratulating them on a really clever move where they've read you and they've done something to avoid it, you know. And, you know, be generous with your time, and let them have turn backs if it's not going to be that bad, if they may have forgotten something. This is a game where you always forget something, even when you're veterans, you know, these, especially the more complex systems like fantasy-based systems, you know, where there's a lot going on, and someone might have forgotten, you know, something really minor, like, oh yeah, I was meant to like put a buff on my thingamies or whatever. You could consider letting them turn back if it's not too far forward, and if other stuff hasn't happened that wouldn't have been relevant to that, you know, or whatever, you know. So there's different ways of approaching it. You've got those win at all cost players that will cheese the rules, and they'll do everything, and they'll very often play the same list over and over and over and over again. It might be a cookie cutter type list, and they'll just keep hitting you with it because it's effective, and they'll keep winning, and that's how they have fun, by beating you. And they could be all great and socialise with you and that stuff, but they're completely impossible to beat. And then maybe interpreting the rules in a certain way that is advantageous to them, that's, you know, and so forth. And this all happens, and you kind of, you know, you need to work out who it is you want to game with. But in the process of doing that, you know, you can give yourself your own best sport award, you know. And I think winning well is an important trophy to take home, as well as losing well, you know. Congratulating your opponent. And even if it's the other way around, where you're always beating your opponent and you're just smashing them into the ground every time, you know, you can congratulate them on their wins as best as you can, you know. And it's just try it. And if you try it, you might just find that you have even more fun than you did before. Because if you're like me and you've got that kind of reciprocal thing where you only have fun, if you're that kind of person like I am, then you are only going to have as much fun as your opponent lets you have. Like their state of mind, if it turns bitter and cold and nasty and they're all like suddenly really down and stuff, that's going to affect me. That's going to mess me up. I might be winning. I might be massacring them. And if they've got the face on and it's all going like that, I'm not going to be having a good time anymore. So my victory was hollow. We stopped having a good game together, you know. And I've had opponents where they're like, come on then, come on, let's roll the rest of the dice, let's finish my unit off, come on, let's roll sixes for you again as usual. Let's do where the attitude is just completely bent out of shape, you know. And that's that extreme broken state where you've destroyed them at that point, you know. And you've maybe tried to keep them alive. Try to say, hey, no, you're doing great and whatever. But, good Lord, you know, just try celebrating the opponent's good luck and successes, because it doesn't take anything away from you, you know. And see if it helps. See what it does to your game. It will make you a better opponent to play against, and it will make people feel like they'll want to game you more, which means you'll get more games in, which means you'll get to play your hobby more, versus everybody avoiding you. And then your victories are limited anyway, except for people that you meet that are then like you if you're a win-at-all-costs player, and then you can both have that kind of experience. If you find those other kind of people that like that and get off on that, and you are a person that gets off on that, and I'm not trying to like be elitist and say we're better hobbyists or better gamers and better spirits than you, but it's about like for like, you know. And I know what I'm like, you know. I'll enjoy a narrative game. I'll enjoy a game, you know, where win or lose, I feel better for having played it. You know, mentally tired, you know, a good kind of fatigue, and like bonds with my opponent have been strengthened. That's the ideal, win or lose, you know. We can discuss the game in good nature and have a mutual appreciation for the game itself and each other. So, celebrate your opponent and be careful of the face, the terrible, terrible face, once it comes on. I'll see you at the table.